There's some bonds in life that are impossible to explain to anyone who has never felt them. The bond between a person and a pet is one of them. It is quiet but powerful, simple but deep. And sometimes, when life takes away the people we love, an animal becomes more than a companion. They become memory, comfort, family, a living piece of the past that still stays with us. This is the story of a man, a cat, and a journey that seemed impossible. A journey filled with heartbreak, hope, kindness, and a reunion so powerful that it reminded everyone who heard it that good people still exist in this world. This is the story of Daniel and his cat, Jasper. It all began during what was supposed to be a fresh start. Daniel Harper and his family were moving from New York to Texas. Like many big moves, it was a mix of excitement, stress, and exhaustion. Boxes had been packed, plans had been made, their old life was being folded up and loaded into trucks, while a new one waited hundreds of miles away. But Daniel wasn't just carrying furniture and belongings with him. He was carrying memories. And among the most precious parts of those memories was his cat, Jasper. Jasper was not just any pet. He had been part of Daniel's life for 12 years. Daniel's mother had adopted Jasper as a birthday gift for him years
Happy
earlier.
birthday, Daniel.
And after
This
she
is
passed
Jasper.
away,
perfect,
Jasper
Mom.
became
Thank you.
something even more meaningful. He was no longer
always
just a
bring me
cat.
comfort.
He was a living connection to her, a reminder of her love, a quiet, breathing piece of the past that still remained beside Daniel in the present. That is why during the long road trip to Texas, Daniel kept checking on him. At every stop, every pause, every stretch of highway, Jasper was there, safe in his carrier, tired, maybe a little annoyed, but still there. Everything seemed under control until one morning in Pennsylvania, everything changed. The family had stopped overnight at a hotel to rest before continuing the drive. They were tired from the road and ready to get moving again the next day. It was just one stop on a long journey. Nothing about that night seemed unusual, but when Daniel woke up the next morning, Jasper was gone. At first, it must have felt impossible. Maybe he was hiding. Maybe he had slipped under a bed, behind a chair, inside a suitcase. Cats were good at disappearing after all. Daniel searched the room once, then again, then more desperately. He checked the bathroom, the closet, under the furniture, behind the curtains, inside every possible hiding place. But Jasper was nowhere. And then panic set in. Daniel rushed out into the hallway. He searched the hotel grounds, the parking lot, the stairwells, the front desk area, the bushes outside, the edges of the property. He asked staff members. He asked strangers. He called Jasper's name again and again. No answer. No sign. Just silence. The search became frantic. Flyers were made. Shelters were contacted. The local area was combed again and again. Hours passed, then more hours. Daniel stayed as long as he could. He kept hoping Jasper would appear from behind a dumpster, from under a staircase, from some hidden corner where a frightened cat might have taken shelter. But he never did. And eventually, Daniel and his family faced a heartbreaking reality. They could not stay forever. The move had to continue. And so, with unimaginable pain, they got back on the road and continued to Texas without Jasper. That drive must have felt endless, not because of the miles, but because of the emptiness. A carrier without a cat, a journey that should have felt like a new beginning, now overshadowed by loss. And for Daniel, that loss ran deeper than most people could see. Because Jasper was not just missing, he was tied to his mother's memory. Losing Jasper felt in some ways like losing another piece of her too. Once the family arrived in Texas, life moved forward the way life always does. There were boxes to unpack, rooms to arrange, paperwork to handle. a new state, a new house, a new chapter. But grief has a way of making even a new home feel incomplete. Daniel missed Jasper in all the small moments, the quiet mornings, the familiar sounds of paws moving across the floor, the sight of a curled-up cat in the corner of the couch,
Jasper!
the nightly
Please
comfort
come out!
of a
Daniel,
warm body
what's wrong?
nearby.
Jasper's
absence wasn't
Sir,
loud.
I'll help. Let's
It
check
was
the lot.
quiet, but it was everywhere. Weeks passed, then months. Daniel never truly stopped wondering. What had happened to Jasper? Was he safe? Had someone found him? Was he alive? Or had he simply disappeared into one of those unanswered stories that haunt people forever? That uncertainty might have been the hardest part of all. Because grief, painful as it is, at least gives a person something final to hold on to. But not knowing leaves the door open in the most painful way possible. And then, months later, something happened that changed everything. One day, Daniel was out at a coffee shop in Texas when his wife called him. A letter had arrived by certified mail. That alone was enough to get his attention, but when she told him where it came from, his entire world stopped. It was from a humane society in Pennsylvania. In that moment, Daniel must have felt something he could hardly name. Fear, hope, shock, disbelief. He rushed home, and when he opened the letter, he read the words he had hardly dared to imagine ever seeing. Jasper had been found, alive. Somewhere near the area where he had gone missing, a family had spotted him at a gas station. He was thin, he looked tired, he clearly needed help. And God forbid they stopped. They didn't look away. They didn't assume someone else would handle it. They cared. They contacted a humane society. The shelter staff took Jasper in, gave him fluids, treated the beginnings of an illness, and fed him what was probably one of the best meals he had eaten in a long time. Then they scanned his microchip. That chip became the tiny
Daniel, we
thread
have to
that
go.
connected everything.
I know.
At first,
Jasper's
the
still out
shelter
there.
hit a problem. The phone number
this on the board?
connected to Jasper's
We
microchip
have
was
to
no
keep
longer
going.
in service. For many stories, that would have been the end of the road. But not this one. Because they kept going. Using the microchip information, they traced Jasper back to the shelter where he had originally been adopted years earlier. From there, they found Daniel's old New York address. A letter was sent. That letter was forwarded, and somehow, against all odds, it made its way to Daniel in Texas. That letter carried more than information. It carried hope back into a home that had been missing it for months. Daniel called the shelter immediately. The emotions were overwhelming. Relief, gratitude, shock, joy. It all came at once. Jasper was alive, safe, found. But even miracles can come with complications, because there was one huge problem left. Jasper was in Pennsylvania, Daniel was in Texas, and getting him home was not going to be easy. Daniel started looking at every possible option: pet transport services, flights, long-distance travel arrangements, anything that might reunite him with Jasper. But the costs were too high, far beyond what he could afford. Flying Jasper also came with concerns. He was older now. He had already been through months of uncertainty and survival. Another major, stressful trip in cargo or through a chaotic airport environment was not ideal. So once again, it seemed like hope had arrived, only to stop just out of reach. But this is the part of the story where kindness takes over. Because the people at the shelter did not stop caring once Jasper had been found. They kept thinking, kept planning, kept asking the question, how do we get this cat home? At first, one idea was a volunteer driving chain. Different people could take different parts of the trip, handing Jasper off from one driver to another until he finally reached Texas. But there was a problem. Jasper was an escape artist. Too many handoffs meant too much risk. One wrong moment, one open door, one panicked jump, and he could be lost all over again. So the shelter kept searching for another way. And then, one staff member made an extraordinary offer. a man named Matthew volunteered to drive Jasper all the way from Pennsylvania to Texas. A full 3-day journey, hundreds and hundreds of miles, just to reunite a cat with his person. Think about that for a moment. A man who had no obligation to do this, no personal reason except compassion, offered to spend days on the road so that one family could be whole again. It's the kind of thing that restores your faith in people. To make the trip possible, a fundraiser was launched, and then the community stepped in. Donations started coming in from strangers, people moved by the story, people who loved animals, people who understood what it meant to lose a pet, and people who simply wanted to help. Before long, enough money had been raised to cover the travel, hotel stays, medical exams, health certificates, and everything else Jasper would need for the journey home. Daniel was overwhelmed. Not just because Jasper was coming back, but because of the love being shown by people he had never even met. It was proof that compassion still lives in the world, in the most ordinary and beautiful ways. Until the trip began, Jasper stayed close to Matthew so he could grow familiar with him. At first, he was cautious, understandably so. He had been through months of survival, uncertainty, and shelter life. But slowly, he started to relax. He came out of hiding. He accepted affection. He allowed trust. And then, after 5 long months apart, the journey began. Matthew placed Jasper safely into the car, secured everything carefully, and started the drive to Texas. For 3 days, the two of them traveled together. And somehow, Jasper handled it like a champ. He stayed calm in the car. He listened to podcasts. He listened, unfortunately, to Matthew's singing. He rode mile after mile toward the family he had somehow found his way back to. Meanwhile, in Texas, Daniel waited. And waiting in a moment like that must have felt almost impossible. Every hour would have felt stretched. Every update would have mattered. Every mile would have felt emotional. And then finally, the day came. The car arrived. Jasper was there. After months of heartbreak, uncertainty, and hope, Daniel was about to see him again. When Jasper's carrier was opened, the moment was almost too much to bear. There he was. Older, thinner than before perhaps, but alive, real, home. And when he recognized Daniel, everything else fell away. Daniel dropped to his knees and reached for him. Jasper came forward. And in that moment, the grief of 5 months finally broke. Daniel held him and cried. Not polite tears, not controlled emotion, real tears. The kind that come from relief so deep it shakes the body. The kind that only happen when something you thought might be gone forever is suddenly back in your arms.
The microchip is active.
The
Tracing the owner
reunion
now.
was covered by
Numbers
local
disconnected.
news, and
We'll dig
fittingly,
deeper.
it happened on National Cat Day. A coincidence, maybe, but one that made the moment feel almost written by fate. Once Matthew's incredible mission was complete, he flew back to Pennsylvania, and Jasper began his new life in Texas. But the story did not end with the reunion, because something about Jasper had changed. Back in New York, he was always a little aloof, a little distant, the kind of cat who loved on his own terms and kept a little mystery around himself. But in Texas, according to Daniel, Jasper became softer, warmer, more affectionate. He grew comfortable with strangers. He sat in laps. He welcomed attention. He even allowed Daniel's young daughter to pick him up, something the old Jasper may never have tolerated. And perhaps most touching of all, he seemed to develop a special bond with her. He would watch over her while she played, stay near her, cuddle with her, guard her in his own quiet little way. It was as if the cat who had survived so much had returned home with a bigger heart. For Daniel, having Jasper back changed everything. The house in Texas finally felt home. The move, which had once been marked by pain and absence, now carried healing too. And of course, Daniel became a strong believer in something very practical: pet microchips, and the importance of keeping them updated. Because without that tiny chip, this story might have ended very differently. But even more than that, Daniel
We need to get
became a
Jasper to Daniel
believer
in
in
Texas.
people.
I'll drive him myself.
In the
Let's start a
strangers who
fundraiser.
found Jasper.
Thank you all so much.
In the
This
shelter
means
staff who
everything. We're
refused
close,
to
buddy.
give up.
You're doing great.
In the volunteers who cared. In the donors who made the impossible affordable. In the driver who gave his time and heart to the journey. This story is not just about one cat finding his way home. It is about what happens when people choose kindness, when they stop, when they help, when they decide that someone else's heartbreak matters. And maybe that is why this story touched so many people. Because in a world that often feels heavy, rushed, and disconnected, this was something different. A reminder. A reminder that there are still people with good hearts. Still people willing to go out of their way for someone they did not know. Still people who see love and loss and reunion and respond with compassion. And that matters. Because hope is not always loud. Sometimes hope is a family pulling into a gas station and noticing a thin cat. Sometimes hope is a shelter worker making one more call. Sometimes hope is a letter forwarded across states. Sometimes hope is a man driving for 3 days with a cat in the passenger seat. And sometimes hope is simply this: that what is lost may still be found. That after all the fear, all the waiting, all the sadness, there can still come a moment when the door opens and home walks back in. Daniel's story with Jasper is one of those rare stories that stays with people. Not because it's dramatic for the sake of drama, but because it's real. Because anyone who has ever loved deeply understands it. And because it reminds us that even after heartbreak, life can still surprise us with grace. In the end, Jasper's journey was not just about surviving. It was about being carried back by kindness. From strangers, from rescuers, from a community, from people who decided one cat, one family, and one reunion were worth fighting for. And that's maybe the most beautiful part of all. Not that Jasper got lost, not even that he was found, but that so many people chose to care enough to bring him home. And that's why this story matters.
Welcome home, buddy. This is
Because
home
at its heart, it tells us something we all need to remember. There is still goodness in this world. There is still people who care. And sometimes, against all odds, love really does find its way home. If you enjoyed this story, take a moment to appreciate the people and animals in your life. And if you have a pet, maybe today is the perfect day to check their microchip information, give them an extra hug, and be grateful for every ordinary moment you get to spend together. Because sometimes the most ordinary moments turn out to be the most precious of all. And as for Jasper, after everything he had been through, after all the miles, all the fear, and all the waiting, he finally did what every heart hopes for. He came home.